In this part two presentation of the universal principle of sacrifices, tithes, and offering, we want to look at what we call consecrated and the dedicated things. Because what we present to God, we must present them as a consecrated, pure, holy offering. And God accepts nothing less. God cannot accept any defiled thing. Won't do. It has to be as God is, holy, pure, and righteous. And we have seen that over and over in the scriptures. They talk about the lambs without blemish, the of atonement, and other sacrifices. And they have to be up to standard. So we look at the consecrated and dedicated things to God in this segment. So first off, we look at the meaning of the word, so to speak, consecrated. In addition, the holy things of God, identifies in scriptures as those that would belong to God. Now, consecrated means solemnly dedicated to or to be set apart for a higher purpose, for an high purpose. Made or dedicated or believed to be holy. So it can be made holy by God Himself, dedicated for holy purpose. We see the lamb at the Passover. You have to take it out for 10 days, and you have to keep it until the 14th day. You just had to keep it from any defect, so to speak, any contamination that would have made it unholy or unworthy. So this consecrated, it is devoted to God for religious ceremony or use. Other meaning of the word consecrated is sanctified, hallowed, sacred. Now, there are a couple of things that God Himself mentioned in scriptures that are holy unto Him. We look at these starting with times. Yeah, God have holy times, friend. And it means that these times and seasons belongs to God. There is the Sabbath, so to speak, the seventh day, blessed and set apart by God for holy purposes. God sanctified it. Genesis 2 and verse 3, and in Exodus 16 verse 23. And the rest of the holy convocations, what we call the festival, the appointed times of God. We call them appointed feast days. We read about those in Leviticus 23 and Isaiah 30 verse 29. Even the year of Jubilee in Leviticus 25 and verse 12, it says, "For it is the Jubilee, it shall be holy unto you. You shall eat the increase thereof out of the field." So God said that this Jubilee, the Jubilee here, the 50th year, is holy unto the people. And from times and seasons, we look at places and objects. The tabernacle, the temple, including the furniture, the ark, and the vessels in Exodus 49 to 11 and First Chronicles. We read about those things. First Chronicles 29 and verse 3. On Mount Sinai, we read about that in Exodus 19:23. The altar that is set apart for God purpose. Exodus 29 and verse 37. The anointed oil and incense. Exodus 30, 25 and 35. Even the holy garments, they call them holy garments for the priests. They had to be made holy. Yeah, and significant, because whatever is relating to the holy God must be holy, must be sanctified. You see, and we read about that in Exodus 29 and the verse 21. Jerusalem also is called the holy city in Nehemiah 11 verse 1, and Isaiah 52 and verse 1. Because God has set apart Jerusalem for his dwelling place. He called it a holy city. But mankind defiles Jerusalem, the holy place of God. And also in the temple or the tabernacles, we see the cooking pots, the bells and the arches, prophesied to be holy in the end times. In Zechariah 14, 20 and to 21. Because it's relating to God, the holy God, the God of creation, friends. And everything that deals with God have to be holy. It have to be set apart. You see, friend, when Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, man lost that connection. Man became corrupt, defiled, and therefore man had to be detached from God. There's a separation, friend. Man cannot have a relationship with God as how God intended when man is unholy. And that's why we have these rituals, these sacrifices, these ordinances. Yeah? So God can have this relationship with man until the time come when man himself can become holy. And in ancient times, we see that there were holy men, in the Old Testament, men of holy men. We saw where Abel was qualified, Seth was qualified, Enoch, Abraham became qualified to be called holy men of God, Jacob and the rest of them. Now we look at offerings and tithes. Yeah, tithes in Leviticus 27, 32 and 32, we see it mentioned as being holy unto God. The first fruits and offerings, whether it's the firstborn, God reserved those things for himself, and therefore God would make them holy unto himself. Leviticus 17 and chapter 22 of Leviticus 2 and 3. We might need to go back, friends, to Leviticus 27 and the verse 32, just to highlight this thing about the tithes. Yeah. And concerning the tithe of the herd or of the flock, even whatsoever passeth under the rod, the 10th shall be holy unto the Lord. The 10th. Yeah, whatever the 10th is. This means all of the 10th. Not just some, but the number 10 is generally belongs to God and cannot be redeemed. God went on to teach us about the 10th that belongs to him. We should not be guilty of the quality. He sanctifies the 10th and set it apart as he did the Sabbaths. So the priest and everything that belonged to God, he set apart for himself. Now look at this text in Leviticus 27, the verse 33. He shall not search whether it be good or bad. It is not the quality, as I mentioned. It is not the object or the item itself. But God already sanctified whatever should become the 10th. neither shall it be changed, or you shall change it, as it rightfully says in the King James Version. Why? And if you change it at all, then both, you can't take it back, both it and the change thereof shall become holy. God specifically says it shall not be redeemed because it has already been designated, it has already been put in motion from the very foundations, from the beginning. Whatever it is, good or bad, God, His Creator, He has the power to change anything. And He already sanctified it from the foundations that the 10th should be holy. So whether we want to recognize it or not, it is holy. And what we do with all the things, we are held accountable for it. There's accountability for defiling God's holy things. God's holy name, His holy Sabbath, His holy days, His holy temple. Yeah. So we continue to look at what God says belongs to Him as holy. So we see we are people. I know there are no people, but certain positions are also holy unto God. The nation of Israel, Exodus 29:16, Deuteronomy 7 and 6. The priests, the Levites, Leviticus 21:6-8. The Nazarenes, or the Nazarites, Numbers 6:5 and 8. And the believers, the saints, the Christians, are called to be holy. 1 Peter 1 and 15 to 16, and in the book of Romans 12 and the verse 1. We are called to be holy. We are a set-apart people. For what purpose? To do the work of God on earth and be His ministers, His priests, so to say. So He set apart positions for persons who had fit who would be in that position to be holy unto Him. All those that would take part in the affairs of God are to keep themselves holy, because God had set apart that position has to be holy positions, and where the persons cannot have poses in God's affair. If you go there by lack of judgment, whatever you're doing you're doing it in vain. God cannot relate to unholy and unrighteous things the way that He does with righteous and holy things. In the book of Exodus 22 and verse 31, it clearly tells you, it says, "And you shall be holy men unto me, neither shall you eat any flesh that is torn of beasts in the field, you shall cast it to the dogs." In this text of Exodus, men that are holy should be separate from others and live a consecrated life. They are, and we are to dress differently, eat only clean things that God permits, and not any undefiled food. 2 Chronicles 31 and verse 6. "And concerning the children of Israel and Judah that dwelleth in the cities of Judah, they also brought in the tithe of oxen and sheep, and the tithe of holy things, which were consecrated unto the Lord their God, and lay them by heaps." So the sheep and the oxen and everything that was to be for God, to be presented to God, must be consecrated, friend. What belongs to God were consecrated unto the Lord their God and dedicated to or set apart for God. As I mentioned, there are consequences of defiling God's holy things. God shared His knowledge and His ways with us, and He reveals the significance of how the things of God are and the consequence of defiling His holy things. separation from God, and the loss of fellowship. Yeah, the consequences. Separation from God, which is life, and loss of fellowship. Sin and impurity creates a barrier that hides God's face from the individual. Death and instant judgment, violating the sanctity of God's presence, such as in the case of Nadab and Abihu, offering unauthorized fire, result in immediate death by fire from God. Being cut off from community. Individuals who touched something unclean and then ate from a peace offering were to be cut off from their people, indicating a severing of their relationship with God and the covenant community. And again, looking at the consequences of violating God holy things, the things that are dedicated to God, consecrated unto God. We see in Zechariah 14, 16, 15, 16, and 17, and 18 that one would violate the holy days, the Feast of Tabernacles, including all of God's holy days. There should be no rain. There will be consequences of plagues on the land. And also in Exodus 31:15, it is clearly recorded there that persons who violate God's holy Sabbath shall surely be put to death. The seventh of the week is holy, and any one of us that breaks this holy Sabbath, this holy day, this period of time, will die. The wages of sin is death. God also have other holy days that I've just mentioned, friend. You find them in Leviticus 23. You shall die. The people shall be cut off. These are significant consequences. Being cut off, friend. Those who defile holy times or offerings by eating them while unclean were to be cut off from their people. Excommunication/exile. So we look at the dedicated, this word, because we see in scriptures where many things are dedicated to God and coming from consecrated. Now, this Hebrew word, H6942, Quadash, translated in the English as dedicated in scriptures, is of a primitive root. To be, quadrally, make, or pronounce, or even observe as clean. Clean as in ceremonially clean or morally clean. Consecrate, hallowed. Be, keep holy, keep holier, make holier, keep purified, sanctify or sanctified, whether of things or of one's self. We continue the discussion and we understand that the same consequences applies when we defile the dedicated things, as we just spoke about, in defiling those things that are consecrated to God. We continue. We are going to look at the dedicated things that was dedicated to God, and do remember that God instructs a man as to how to worship him and what is required of us. We want to look at 1 Chronicles 18 and verse 11 from the King James Version, and it says, Then also King David dedicated unto the Lord with the silver and the gold that he brought from all these nations, from Edom and from Moab and from the children of Ammon and from the Philistines and from the Amalek. This text gives a similar event as Hebron with Melchizedek. David was actually coming from a victorious war and dedicated the large portion to him. Yeah, these also includes money, friend, silver and gold. Back then, they called those that they received from the wars spoils of war. The writers don't have to be repetitive at all times by mentioning who David would have given the Lord's portion to, because we already learn that from the very offset that men appointed by God would have been in charge of the ministry of God. Book of Numbers 3 and verse 3 says, "These are the names of the son of Aaron, the priest which were anointed, whom he consecrated to minister in the priest's office." These passages of scriptures reveal that God have already set plans in the earth of things and persons that would have belonged to him, and just as the Moed from Genesis 1 and 14. They are wholly appointed times and things to God. The revelation of these moments in time does not necessarily mean this was an afterthought. No, the tenth was not an afterthought. Also would have been a set apart number from God from the very beginning as well. God knows the beginning from the end, and he did set that in motion, friends. He knew that it is going to be needed, it's necessary, and he put it in motion, he put it in place until the time came. So when it comes on the God's order, our laws, if I may say this, as for me, the 10th one shall be and is always holy to the Lord, and just as violating the Sabbath and all the other holy days and holy things, we also violate the 10th if we don't recognize it and do unto it as God command. And everything else that belongs to God belongs to him. We are stand in judgment of defiling such. We want to go to money, friends, but let me continue with this section here, and then I'll go to money. A few more verses from Proverbs 3 and verse 9 and 10. It says, "Honor the Lord with all thy substance, and with the first fruits of all thine increase." God have already sanctified the first fruits. It's not we going to sanctify it unto God. It belongs to God, friend. And you talk about, and the first fruits of all thine increase. Everything, it belongs to God, the very first. Yeah, the first 10th belongs to God. The first child belongs to God. The first of the lambs and the first of your crops belongs to God. And not honoring this, we are in judgment. In Genesis 4, the case of Abel and Cain, did we mention that it was all of the firstborns? We did mention, in the part 1. If you have missed it, go back. All of the firstborns Abel took to God. Because from the very foundation, from the very beginning of the human race, God have instructed man his ways, his knowledge, and they were living. It is evidence that they were living by those laws and principles, the sacrifices and tithes and offerings to God. Exodus 23 and verse 19. "The first of the first fruits of thy hand thou shalt bring into the house of the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not see it or sacrifice a kid in his mother's milk." So when you have the firstborn of your sheep or flock, or cattle, or anything, friends, you must wait until whether the cub or the kid or the calf have been weaned from its mother's breast before you give it unto God. humanity has to adhere to these laws of God, and remember, there are consequences that we just mentioned. In the book of Exodus 22, we will look quickly at the verse 29 and the verse 30. It says, "Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of thy ripe fruits, and of thy liquors." Yeah, liquor. "The firstborn of thy sons shalt thou give unto me. Likewise shalt thou do with thine oxen and with thy sheep. 7 days it shall be with his dam, and on the 8th day thou shalt give it to me." 8th day. God be more specific now. "With these animals you shall give it to me." The verse. This concept of first fruits is carried over into the New Testament as belonging to God. So here we see in Romans 11 and verse 16, "For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy. And if the root be holy, so are the branches." The principle of the first fruits. Very important for us to dig dive and understand these principles, because they are there for our purpose. All of this, whatever is holy, belong to God. In 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 20, "But now is Christ risen from the dead, and become the first fruits of them that slept." Christ is the first fruits of them that slept. He is the first of a human being that was dead and resurrected to eternal life, friends. He is the first of them that slept. This indicates to us that those that should follow Christ would also be called the first fruits. Christians are called and set apart. To God, we are first fruits. James 1 and 18. "Of his own will begotten he us with the word of truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures," or creations. This newly creation, friend. Christ belongs to the Father. He was set apart for a purpose, and he fulfilled his purpose. And so are the rest of us, the first fruits. We are called and set apart. We are sanctified and made righteous to do God's will. We are indeed a set apart people, chosen by the Father to be the bride of his Son. We get more technical when we look at part 3, friends. Now that we understand that things that are set apart of God are holy and should be they are consecrated, friend, whether by God himself or by us, they are to be treated as such. Defiling those holy things that belongs to God results in our death, punishment. Part 3, we look at money. This is what you've been waiting for. For those who are tithing and are in the middle, wondering whether you should tithe or not, whether it is obligated or not. Friends, what belongs to God belongs to God. It will always belong to him. We go to part 3.